This lesson is about expressions and variables. It's an important part of algebra, the very beginning parts of algebra, making sure that students understand the difference between expressions and equations and the use of variables and how they would fit into those expressions or into those equations. An expression is a mathematical phrase that combines numbers, just like digits, typical numbers we use all the time, operations. There are 4 of those: adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And then sometimes there are variables in there as well. So in the expressions that we do in this lesson, some will have just numbers and operations. And then later on we'll get into expressions that have all 3: numbers, operations, and variables also. Biggest thing about expressions: an expression is something that does not have an equal sign. If it does have an equal sign, then it'll be something totally different that we'll talk about later in future lessons, called an equation. So if there are numbers and there are operations without an equal sign, then you know that's an expression. Alright, so let's start handling some of these expressions. So for the following problem, we're going to write an expression and then evaluate it. Evaluate it is just a mathematical term that talks about giving an answer or finding the answer. So that's what evaluate means. And I really want to use these terms that they use in the math book, also in the math standards for Minnesota, the test that they're going to be taking later on, a standardized test, a state test. Will use those sorts of terms. So I want students to be able to know how to do it, but also I want them to be able to use the same terms and vocabulary that they'll use on the test that they'll take later. So Kim had 24 cookies. She ate 6 and then baked 12 more. So we'll start with how many cookies she had at the beginning. So we're talking about 24 cookies. She ate 6. That's one event that happened. So I'll take that event and bracket it, put parentheses around it. So Kim had 24 cookies. She ate 6. So we have that taken care of. Then baked 12 more. So we're going to add, because she baked some more, and she baked 12 more, so that's 12. Notice there is no equal sign in here. We could do an equal sign and find an answer. If we were to write an equal sign, it would turn from an expression into an equation. If it has an equal sign, then it's an equation. Alright, so first we've done this write an expression part. That part is done. Now it's time to evaluate it. So 24 minus 6 is 18, plus 12, so our answer is 30. So they've done both parts of the question. Write an expression and then evaluate it. Alright, we'll move on to the next. Write an expression and then evaluate it. Joel had 10 dimes. He gave 4 to Gary. So writing the expression first, saying Joel had 10 dimes and he gave 4 to Gary. So that's going to subtract from the amount that he has. He gave 4 to Gary. So we've done the first part. It says write an expression, and now it's time to evaluate it. To evaluate this expression, get the answer, which is 6. He has 6 dimes left. Alright, I'd like you to do this on your own right now. Look at the directions. It says write an expression and then evaluate it, just like we've done for the last 2. Please push pause right now and try this one, and then compare your answer with what I get as I do it. So I'd like you to press pause right now and try the problem. Okay, you should be back. 11 cars were in the race. 7 more cars joined the race. So we have 11 cars that were in the race to start with. 7 more means we're going to add some more to the race, and we're going to add 7 more. This is the expression. If you did write an equal sign, then you made what's called an equation, and we'll talk about those later, but this is an expression right here. And evaluating it means you're going to get the answer, which is 18. So I hope that's how it worked. If it didn't, you have to do a little bit more work with it. I can be involved in that work. Your parents can be involved in that work. We've got your book to help out, but know the difference between an expression and an equation. All right. Now we're going to start moving into the next. As we do these next couple, we actually have what's called a variable. A variable, many times, is a letter. And a letter gets used to replace a value, a numerical value, until we find out. So a variable right here is many times a letter and it's used for a specific purpose. It's used to replace an unknown. We don't know this amount yet, so we're putting a letter or a symbol in its place in the expression. Well, later on we'll put them inside the equations to take its place. And when we take its place, then we can solve for it and then get the answer later on. So right now it's just something we're putting in there in its place. Okay. Right, so the directions say write an equation with a variable, then explain what the variable represents. Holly bought several books. John gave her 9 more. So I know we're going to be, we see that word more, and we know we're going to be adding 9 to something, because John gave her 9 more. This might be a time where we'd use a variable b. b plus 9. Now what is b? Well, b is the number of books Holly had. And I'll even put right away so we know it was earlier. B is the number of books that Holly had right away. She bought several books. We don't know how many. It's an unknown, like we had talked about up here. However many it was, John gave her 9 more. So we're going to take that number B, and we're going to add 9 to it, and then we'll know. Now sometime later we'll find out what B is, and then we can find out the total number of books she has right now. But for right now, we just have the expression B plus 9. I would like you to try this. Write an expression with the variable, then explain what the variable represents. I would like you to pause right now. I'd like you to read this problem. I'd like you to write down what you would write for the expression, and then compare it with how I do it later. Okay, welcome back. I had 14 pretzels. I ate some and gave 3 to Maria. I had 14 pretzels, that's what I started with. I ate some. That means I'm going to subtract from the amount that I had. I don't know how many. This is my unknown. I replace my variable with something I don't know, my unknown. So So 14 minus, I'll even say P right now. Now that's an event, that's something that happened, so I'll put that in parentheses. Now you may not have had these parentheses. That would be something that I could add for this event. So something that happened, and you can bracket that. I had 14 pretzels. I ate some and gave 3 to Maria. So I am going to subtract again, because I'm going to give 3 to Maria. Now P in this case is the number. Number of pretzels so P is the number of pretzels I ate. Alright, so this is just the beginning of algebra for us, working on expressions and variables and how they are used together.